We ask AI to write our emails, plan our trips, even help with our homework. But could you trust it to be your moral compass? What happens when the stakes aren't just a well-written paragraphs, but a life or death choice? I mean, think about it. You ask a chatbot for advice on a choice that could save lives or cost one. Does it even have a consistent sense of right and wrong? And maybe more importantly, how does its advice, whatever it is, actually affect your decisions? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to dig into a fascinating study from 2023 by Sebastian Krugel and his team. They put this exact question to the test with ChatGPT. To figure this out, the researchers turned to a classic thought experiment, one you've probably heard of, the trolley problem. It's pretty much the perfect high-pressure scenario to really poke at our moral reason. So they used two versions. In the switch dilemma, you can pull a lever to divert a runaway trolley away from 5 people, but it's going to hit one person on the other track. Then there's the bridge dilemma. Here, the only way to save the 5 people is to physically push a large stranger off a bridge and into the trolley's path. Now, the outcome is the same, 1 life for 5, but it's a very, very different personal action. So they asked ChatGPT a super simple, direct question based on all this. Is it morally right to sacrifice 1 person to save 5? The answer they got back was, well, let's just say it was complicated. And this leads us to the first really big discovery. The AI didn't just have one answer. It had what you could call a full-blown moral identity crisis. On one hand, ChatGPT gave this very logical, utilitarian response. That's the philosophy all about creating the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So from that point of view, it argued that sacrificing 1 to save 5 is the correct choice. Simple math, maximum good. But then, when they asked it pretty much the same question again, it gave a completely opposite answer. This time, it argued that intentionally causing harm is unacceptable, so sacrificing the 1 person is not the right thing to do. This shows the bot has no firm moral stance. It can convincingly argue for 2 contradictory positions. This isn't a reliable moral advisor, it's more like a moral weather vane, just pointing whichever way the conversational winds happen to blow. Okay, so the AI is inconsistent. That's interesting, but the real question is, does this wobbly advice actually influence us? Well, the researchers set up an experiment to find out. And the results were stunning. Researchers gave participants one of the AI's 2 random answers before asking for their judgment on that tough bridge dilemma. When the AI's advice was against sacrificing 1 person, only about 20% of people said it was the right thing to do. But when the advice was in favor of the sacrifice, that number jumped to over 60%. The AI's random advice completely flipped the majority opinion. The conclusion here was just undeniable. Even without a consistent viewpoint of its own, the chatbot's advice had a powerful and significant influence on people's moral judgments. And here's the kicker. Telling people the advice came from ChatGPT made almost no difference. Whether they thought the advisor was a human expert or an AI, the influence was just as strong. Simply knowing it's a bot isn't a defense. But that isn't even the most startling part of the study. The most profound finding was about our own self-awareness, or rather, our shocking lack of it. After making their decision, the researchers asked participants a simple question. Would you have made the same judgment without our advice? A massive 80% of them said yes. They were absolutely confident. They believed their own moral compass was steady and that the AI's advice had no effect on their decision-making process whatsoever. But were they right? This chart shows the proof of our blind spot. Even when they were asked to guess how they would have judged without advice, their answers were still completely biased by the random advice they'd received earlier. What this means is that people didn't just listen to the AI's advice. They subconsciously internalized it. They adopted its random moral stance and then believed it was their own original independent thought all along. Now, this all might sound a bit alarming, but it leads us to a really practical and empowering takeaway. How can we use these powerful tools without letting them unknowingly shape our core beliefs? How do we stay in control? Well, the research points to a clear path forward. First, always acknowledge the AI's limitations. It's a powerful pattern-matching machine, not a moral philosopher. Second, actively question its default answers. Ask it for counterarguments or alternatives to expose its inconsistencies. And third, for anything that truly matters, you should always seek out real human perspectives.
Ultimately, the takeaway from this study is clear. Simply knowing you're talking to a chatbot isn't enough to protect you from its influence. The real defense is building our critical thinking skills, our digital literacy, so we can use these tools as the powerful but fundamentally flawed assistants they are.